Welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show, Pacifica host Garland Nixon, in a role reversal on occasion, takes a seat at the other side of the table as a guest of the Take No Prisoners UK host and political figure George Galloway, in fact a prior host himself on Pacifica, and together tackling the art of figuring out the world.
My favorite US commentator, as you all very well know, is the one and only Garland Nixon, radio talk show host, political analyst, who joins us now. Garland, welcome back. Always a pleasure to see you. Let's start with the Epstein affair. What's the justification for not yet having published a single name on Epstein's client list?
Well, apparently it was just that was campaign rhetoric. It was made to sound good. Trump sounded like he was the anti-establishment person, and he was going to let out all of the information that we'd never found before. The reality is that I think those of us who thought we would, well, I'll put it like this: there were people that thought we may get information on RFK and JFK, but when it came to Epstein, the people who committed the crimes are all mostly probably still alive, still very powerful figures. So I think it's a bit naive of us to even have thought that Donald Trump could do that, or he'd probably commit suicide in the White House and hang himself if he tried it.
Well, very succinctly put. I called him Tony Soprano, but on a very loud and vulgar day at the Pope's funeral. But one of the things that he did do that I commend, he gave little Macron a humiliating dressing down when Macron tried to gate crash his tete-a-tete with little Zelensky, who was dressed even more inappropriately than President Trump. What do you think the two were saying to each other?
Well, the bottom line, and I've said this for a while, is I think it doesn't really matter what Donald Trump says. We have to judge by his actions, because he's big on over-the-top rhetoric. He is, traditionally an entertainer, so he loves to get out in public, give the appearance of dressing down someone, arguing with someone, making a lot of noise. But when he comes back, one day he says, we're so close to a deal with the Russians. The next day he says, they are doing bad things and we're going to have to go to massive sanctions. So we just seem to be treading water, doing the same thing over and over. The other thing I'll say about Donald Trump's dress and acts of decency, or the lack thereof, at the funeral. You just told a story about a country, the United States, through its proxy, Israel, that's slaughtering people. Men, women, and children, starving people to death. I think it would be unreasonable for us to even expect any level of decency from the leader of a country that would do those kinds of things. Donald Trump should have came in dressed like Dracula with blood all over his suit. That would have been more appropriate for the leader of the United States and Israel at this point. It would be more accurate and appropriate, I think.
It has taken the darkest turn in the sense that not only is there a daily attrition, more than half of the victims being women and children, but mass starvation. It's plausible, because we've had 18 months to observe it, that people are not moved by bombings of buildings, because the argument always is, well, the terrorists are hiding in there. But that argument cannot be adduced when you are boasting that you are literally starving people to death in complete defiance of all international law. So they just actually pretend that it isn't happening.
Well, and I think the last part that you said is important, the part about international law. You know, we can talk about the morality of what's going on. Certainly, we can talk about the horrible things that are happening, but the reality is there's international law here. These violations are violations of international law. And I think, you know, the people will defend the Israelis, whether they have a, quote, right to defend themselves or, you know, whether Hamas is in a building. But the bottom line is these things are all covered by international law. And the United States and the Europeans will say we're sailing through the Taiwan Straits because international law says we have freedom of navigation, and they will flout international law when it benefits them and completely ignore the daily violations, the arrogant rhetoric that we get from the Israelis that make it clear that they intend to violate international law, and you know that they really feel as though international law doesn't apply to them because they have the United States there to protect them. So, you know, what we're dealing with is massive violations of international law. And this is an indictment on the international institutions that are supposed to keep this international law, because they'll put out a warrant for President Putin for a claim that doesn't even have a plaintiff, but yet they can't figure out that slaughtering men and women and children and starving people to death is not a violation of the laws that are written right in front of their faces.
What about the great tariff war? That's another Trump failure, isn't it? He started out saying this would bring China to its knees. Then he said China would be bound to call him. Then he asked China to call him. And now he's claiming that the two are speaking on the phone when the Chinese flat out deny it. They say there are no negotiations going on, and there will be none as long as Trump is sticking to these tariffs against China. Help us through this labyrinth, Garland.
Well, there are a number of, you know, suspicions here. One of them that I have is this was effectively the Nord Streaming of American people, in the same way that they blew up the German pipeline, knowing that it was going to have a negative effect on the German people and the people of Europe, but with completely disregard for the working class and their lives. They're taking these actions, and I think one could argue that either they were decoupling from China, planning for a war on China, so we've got to decouple first, or that they felt that, you know, there could be some combination of both, or that they felt that they could take action that would cripple China's economy. But either way, it's the same thing, a complete reckless disregard for the everyday lives and the economic needs for the working class of America. But I think it backfired. I do believe that it has presented an opportunity for China, to be quite honest. I think China knows the United States is saying we want to go to war with China by 2027 or 2029, whatever year it is. It gives the Chinese an opportunity to stop selling the United States the magnets and the various things that our military-industrial complex needs to build the weapons to attack China. I would suspect that when there is some level of an economic resolution to this, that China's still going to say, we're not selling you the stuff to build bombs and missiles because you're telling us that you're going to attack us with those bombs and missiles. I would also think that China may say, look, we're both have some pain here. You need a resolution. How about this? Stay the heck out of Taiwan and we'll give you the resolution. Because what does China do? What does Trump do if China says that's where we draw the line? You got to stay out of Taiwan and stop sending them missiles. I think the U.S. would be in a bad situation because the neocons wouldn't let Trump say yes. But if he didn't, our economy would get wiped out.
Now, the domestic political situation, I mean, we now know, I think I asked you before, if Joe Biden was still alive. Well, we know he's barely alive, but alive enough to eat spaghetti in a Rome bistro, although God knows the mess he made down the front of his shirt. But he is still alive, but is he nominally still the leader of the U.S. Democrats? Who's calling the shots? Who's the opposition in the United States?
You know, the Democratic Party is not really an opposition. They are an opposition to Donald Trump. but not in opposition to Donald Trump's policies. You know, they'll say we hate Donald Trump and he's terrible and Elon Musk is evil, but when you ask them about about his foreign policy, the only anger they have at him is that he's not hawkish enough. And if you look at his, they push back a little bit when it comes to the China tariffs, but again, they're so anti-China that they're not going to push back even on that. We do have these fake protests coming out, and these anti-Trump protests, and they're fake because the people who are setting up these protests are on the mainstream media all constantly talking about the protests. These protests are pushed by the mainstream media. And might I add, the people that set up the last protest, the two people the indivisible.org that set up the last protest that Nancy Pelosi attended, one of them was a former State Department advisor. The other one was a former Obama advisor who ran an NGO that was funded by BlackRock. So now we've got the BlackRock State Department resistance that are setting up protests around the country. So now, one thing about these protests, there's no anti-war element to them. The only thing they addressed when it came to war was they had a sign up that said hands off NATO. So that's the opposition to Donald Trump, is the hands off NATO protesters.
You couldn't make it up. Finally, and I'm always grateful for your time, Garland, it's good news that there's not much in the news about the Iran talks. They were in Oman, they moved to Rome. Heaven knows where they are now, but the fact is they're still going on. Are you confident that there won't be a US-Iran war?
Yes, I am. I believe that it was a bluff. If you look at the three places where the U.S. is negotiating, they're all the same negotiation. In Iran, in Russia, in China, in all three places, the United States is playing as though they have a strong hand against China. The United States is folding their hand because we cannot maintain these tariffs. Against Russia, the United States, Trump even admits Russia's going to win the war. Russia doesn't need a resolution to this. We do. We need to get out of it. In Iran, I do not believe that the United States can defeat Iran in the way that they'd like to defeat Iran. They can do. Could they win? Possibly. I don't know what you define win, but they'd take a terrible bloody nose, and theoretically, our entire economy could be wiped out. So it's too big a risk for Donald Trump. So in all of the negotiations, the United States is not the world hegemon, doesn't have the military or economic power that it once had, but it's trying to negotiate as though it does, which means it's going to lose all of them.
Garland, how does one find your material now that they have locked you out of Twitter, or have you got back in? I tagged you earlier, and it did go through, but as I understand it, the last time we talked, you can't even open your Twitter.
Oh, no. They according to Twitter, they can't figure out who owns the account that I've had since 2009. So they're completely, but they are nice enough to accept my payment. So I continue to pay them. That is, in fact, it keeps the statute of limitations over, because every time they take another payment from me, that's another incident of breach of contract. But the bottom line is, people can find me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Telegram, and I have a YouTube, Rumble, and Rockfin show. So I'm on there daily having fun.
Breaking news, everything is bad. It's just as terrible as you imagined, and probably worse. With more, we go to Tom Lee Cruz. Tom Lee.
We're all in danger, Dan Lee.
Jesus Christ, what can we do?
Absolutely nothing.
It was good knowing you, Tom Lee.
I can't say the same.
That was unnecessary. Let's check in with Olivia Lee Rodrigo. Olivia Lee, where are you?
That's none of your business. Do you hear that? Cut the music. Do you hear that?
What do you hear?
That's the sound of us slowly dying. Can you hear it?
I can hear it. It's louder in my left ear.
Olivia Lee Rodrigo reporting
I
from
actually
where
have some
I
more
am.
questions for you. Okay, we're going to go to Kevin Lee Costner, who has more with politics.
No, I don't.
Let's send it over to our senior correspondent, Nicole Minaj.
Look at this chart. Let's bring it up.
What am I looking at here?
I don't know, but it doesn't look good.
That looks bad.
Yeah, it's probably bad.
Let's go to our eye in the sky, Timothy Chalamet. Timothy.
Man, I am so high up right now.
You are in a helicopter.
I didn't know that when I got in. I thought it was a weird car.
What do you see up there?
Everything, it's too much. We were never supposed to see this. I need to go back down.
You stay right there. We're going to go to commercial. And we're back. Let's check in with Morgan Lee Freeman with sports. Morgan Lee.
I just want to take this sports time to say that whatever you hear about me in the next 24 hours is completely false. People are going to say things and have documents and recordings to back up what they say, and it's just not real. You should believe me and not their solid evidence. Knicks, take it by 2.
This is when champions are born. We're going now to Frankly Sinatra with the weather, Frankly.
It's everywhere.
We won't be hearing from him anymore. Coming up, a cat learns how to water ski and then drowns.
And that was corporate media breaking news, or rather broken news, courtesy of Positive Side of X. And coming up next on Arts Express.
They want you to change your name. Archie Leach doesn't cut it. Anything come to mind?
Cary Grant.
Now, isn't that a beautiful name?
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Weekend box office. Cary Grant is a character. I've been very careful about how he's perceived.
This is the dreamiest guy in the world we're talking about.
You're not going to break my heart, are you?
Probably.
I walked into that one.
I ain't going home tomorrow. I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna be a star.
What accent you got, kid?
English.
Okay, thank you. Next.
I spent most of my life wondering who I was supposed to be.
You'll find that we're all saints in this town, my dear, aren't we, Cary?
I'll never let you go, Archie. You know what's wrong with you?
No, what?
Nothing.
Dad, when am I gonna see Mother again?
I'll be right back, I promise.
Please, I want to go!
So it's okay to have a silly child like me in real life, but in La La Land it makes you look ridiculous?
You're Cary Grant.
Not to you, just Archie.
Anybody who ever cared about me could never do that to me.
Shut up! My daughter, Jennifer, she is by far my best production.
What a journey we've been on.
Now, I know exactly who I am.
And no, that was not Cary Grant, alias Archibald Leach, rather actor Jason Isaacs portraying him in the dramatic series Archie. And Isaacs is our guest on the show, himself a master of dramatic disguises nearly 200 times on screen, including portrayals of Peter the Great, Mephisto, Dracula, Captain Hook, Satan twice, in Star Wars, Suicide Squad, Justice League, Armageddon, Batman, Star Trek, The West Wing, Harry Potter, and more recently in a setting he describes as Lord of the Flies, The White Lotus.
สวัสดีค่ะ Welcome to the White Lotus in Thailand ค่ะ
I'm on an exchange program.
I'm starting to feel like something good's gonna come out of this.
Stress management meditation.
Yeah, you need this.
Gluten-free rice and coconut balls? Are we at a fat farm?
Everyone runs from pain towards pleasure. But they get there only to find more pain.
Like a race to the bottom.
I'm gonna have to drink myself to sleep. What the fuck is this place?
But Isaacs is taking a more sobering turn in the biodrama War of Words, touching on the life of Russian journalist Anna Politkovskaya, who in the midst of the religious separatist 1999 Chechnyan Civil War uprising and those civilians caught in between, Anna tragically sought to report on the civilian plight and against the Russian government, and with much of the historical context missing, as this is not a documentary, there is no mention of the simultaneous surrounding moves against Russia, including NATO's Cold War aggression against them, expanding on their borders, not following through on enacting the NATO-Russia Founding Act, and massive NATO bombing and disintegration of Russian ally Yugoslavia as a move to eradicate that country the same year. As for Chechnya, they are dedicated allies with Russia in the current war with Ukraine. And the release of this film denouncing Russia while peace negotiations are taking place to end the war, and a production financed primarily by the U.S., currently enabling genocide, if not outright mass starvation, elsewhere on the planet in Gaza. And following is our conversation with Jason Isaacs about many things, including Words of War, and in which she portrays the not exactly joyful spouse of Anna. First, some scenes from Words of War, then Jason Isaacs.
War has two sides. I say it has three. The innocent civilians caught in the middle of a medieval brutal war.
I don't think we need a war correspondent in Chechnya. We need a people correspondent.
If you really want to report the truth, I'll show you difficult things for you to see.
Well, you said you were going to be tough on him.
Your wife, she's making quite a name for herself. A bit reckless, do you think?
So she's well aware of the danger she's in, so.
But are you?
I've woken up every morning and wondered if my mother has been found in a ditch.
I'm a journalist.
Journalist.
The tactics employed by the Kremlin is itself creating a wave of violence that has never been experienced.
Oh my God.
The war's come home.
People are killing each other. You get in the middle and you're dead too.
Chechnya's your baby, while this newspaper is mine.
There is nothing of value apart from the truth. And I do not intend to stop.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hello, Jason Isaacs, and welcome to our show.
Thanks very much.
Now, when moving between so many disparate characters, Sasha in Words of War, Cary Grant and Archie, Peter the Great, Mephisto, Dracula, Captain Hook, Satan twice, and more recently, Ratliff in The White Lotus. Do you ever experience an identity crisis in contrast to the real you?
No, because I've been with my wife for 37 years and she wouldn't put up with it for a split second. But also, the jobs you're mentioning don't happen on the same day. One of them was in 2002 and one of them was in 2022. So there is a little bit of distance between these characters. I think if I was to jump between them in a one-man show, I might get slightly confused. But I certainly never get myself confused with any of them. Do I carry any of what goes on for those people into my life? Never consciously, obviously, but yes, of course you do. There's a misconception about acting, that acting is pretending to do the things that are in the script. You know, so you shout when you're meant to shout, or you pull a face. So, no, acting is filling up a character from the inside so that the little bits that overlap with what the audience sees seem credible. Meaning you have to feel, as much as you possibly can, the things that the characters are feeling. You have to go through what they're going through as much as you can. So when you're feeling grief, you're feeling grief. You know, is it as bad as something terrible like your child or your wife dying? No, but is it as close as you could possibly get? Yeah, that's my job, is to move myself to feel, and in Words of War, to feel the shame of the resentment that I feel against my wife, and then to disappear into depression and to be alienated from, to be confused about myself, ethically but financially to be emasculated and all those things. So do I get, it was a funny question, like, do I carry this? No, I'm not. No part of me is any more Captain Hook than it is, Zhukov from Death of Stalin or anything. But do you, at the end of the day's filming, carry some of what you've been embodying during the day in your body? Yeah, of course you do. How could you not?
What was it about your character, Sasha, that drew you in to be part of Words of War?
It wasn't really the character. It was the extraordinary story of Anna Politkovskaya and how timely this story, which is set maybe nearly 20 years ago now, was, and how important a subject it is to cover and to make dramas about, because dramas reach people that documentaries and news don't. because it's at a time when not only are journalists in danger all over the world of their lives, but actual real journalism and the free press is in danger, even in those Western democracies where we thought it would always be safe.
Now, your character, Sasha, has a rather unusual position in the film, ironically somewhat on the same side as the Russians, in that you're stuck with being the disapproving and unhappy spouse of Anna in terms of being against her pursuit of the Chechnya situation. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I've only just met you, Perry, so I hate to disagree with you, but I think I would question your assessment of the situation. He's absolutely on the same side as his wife. However, whilst that's true, he presents the equivalent of 60 Minutes. He's a television presenter, and he's mildly critical or mildly analytical of the situation, but he's enjoying his job. It's a prestigious job. So whilst personally he agrees with his wife, he couldn't possibly disagree ethically with what she's doing. She's reporting what's going on there. At the same time as agreeing with her, ethically, he loses his job. And he loses his status. This is a very patriarchal society, and his wife begins to eclipse him, not just with the quality of her journalism, but with her international fame. And he's in a tricky position because he can't criticize her morally, but so he latches onto things like you're putting the family in danger, and other people can do it, even though he knows she's doing, in some sense, the right thing. He tries to justify the anger and resentment that actually comes from ego.
And what was it like for you filming in Latvia in the midst of a different conflict, with Latvia being a NATO country, sharing a nearly 200-mile border with Russia and armed in a tense standoff with Russia? What was that like?
Well, the Latvia conflict wasn't preying on our minds so much as the Ukraine conflict,
But Latvia and those countries surrounding Russia are arming right now.
They do, but when we were filming it, the invasion of Ukraine had happened, and so it felt like history repeating itself. And we were making a story about something that had happened some time ago, and yet it was playing out on the news every day. That was what we were talking about, and that's what the Latvians were talking about. They weren't, the people we were with were not talking about them being at risk yet. It was still about Ukraine and how that was going to play out.
And regarding war in this movie, what are your thoughts about the endless war going on right now across Europe, and with actually a lot of European war movies coming out right now?
Well, first of all, mankind has tragically, and I say mankind because it is mostly men, of course, seem to want, need, and repeatedly return to war. I wish we learned from history. I wish we could, we seem not to learn from history. What are my thoughts on it? I have no profound thoughts on it. I'm horrified by it, obviously. To be English and to watch the news recently and to see on one of our mainstream news programs at night, the head of MI6, which is our CIA equivalent, talk about how if all the European countries got their armies together, we could beat Russia in the ground war, and think, wait a second, this isn't some lunatic wearing a colander on his head. This is a legitimate man discussing it as if it might be a possibility in our near future. It's beyond contemplation.
Yeah.
So what I think about it, I think war is a horrendous thing. I also think war is necessary sometimes because when someone comes at you with a gun or tries to kill you, you better defend yourself. So there are people who think, no one should ever pick up a gun, no one should ever shoot anyone else, and I'm with them. But if someone's coming at me with a knife and I've got a gun, I'll shoot them. That is the nature of it. So you have to defend yourself, and you have to be, I guess, prepared to defend yourself, and you have to arm yourself to defend yourself. And I don't know how one gets out of that cycle. What are my thoughts on war? I think my thoughts on war are pretty much the same as everybody's thoughts on war.
And related to that, you once referred with disappointment to the UK politically as, quote, Lord of the Flies. Do you have any update on that, or have you changed your mind at all?
I never said that. I don't know where you thought.
Well, I found it on Wikipedia.
Well, first of all, Wikipedia is written by people at home who have their own agenda. Wikipedia, and I actually recently I was quoted as saying that the set of the White Lotus, when we were there for 7 months, was not bliss and paradise. It was a combination of a wonderful summer camp and Lord of the Flies, in that everybody was away from home, away from their normal social and anchors, And all human behaviour was there, just trying to make the public aware that we weren't just on a holiday. It was a mini community, and all the things you would imagine happen over 7 months away would happen. And it was me trying to dress up an interview so that I don't say the same incredibly dull answer over and over again. And boy, have I paid for that comment.
Now, I see in the film, Words of War, that most of the characters speak English, or as we say in this country, most of the characters speak British. And
right.
But the characters who are not Russian, they speak with an accent in other languages.
The Chechens have an accent in order for the audience to be aware that they're from a different country. That's correct.
Yeah, but I noticed that, I noticed that there's quite a multicultural cast, in particular depicting the Chechens, but I didn't notice any Chechen actors. But what was that multicultural interaction like for you dramatically?
You've asked the wrong person. All of my scenes were with Maxine Peake, who's one of Britain's greatest actresses, and one of the things that was attractive about doing the job, frankly. I've seen her over the years be magnificent on camera, and I've seen her be magnificent on stage. And I knew the director, who just won a bunch of awards last week for a BAFTAs for his TV work. And I knew that we'd be allowed to improvise because that was a discussion we had going in. And so I was excited about those scenes, but I have no idea what it was like working with the actors playing the Chechens because I didn't work with any of them. So
right.
I have no idea what it was like working with them.
Okay. And you've been described, quote, as frequently playing elegant villains. What is your reaction to that?
I think somebody wrote that in an IMDb entry in about 2005. And I'm not sure they've seen much of my work. Oddly, I've played, I've done, I think I was totting it up recently, just looking at IMDb. I think I've played about 200 parts, something like that, in my 37 years as an actor.
Yeah.
And I just for fun, when I was bored and insomnia, about 30 of them could be described as the antagonists, and about 170 weren't. So that was someone being slightly lazy. What it really means is some of the villains I've played, some of the antagonists I've played, have been in things that became very popular. So I actually, I've played a bunch of detectives, I've played a bunch of heroes, I've played a bunch of soldiers, I've played, I'm the smartest man on the planet in Armageddon. I was a doctor in Good Sam, a heart surgeon. But Harry Potter films obviously are still being watched 25 years on or 20 years on and all over the world. And Captain Hook, Peter Pan has become a very big film. It wasn't very big at the box office. And The Patriot seems to be on every July the 4th in America, and many Americans think it's a Ken Burns documentary about the Independence War. It's not that historically accurate, but I do think it's a wonderful film. So those are three parts that really resonate still, a long time after I shot them. And so I don't mind at all if people, want to categorize me as something, but actually if you look at the things that I do, that's not the case. By the way, I'll always take the word elegant. I'm happy to have that one attached to me.
And what can you say about your upcoming film? I hope this is correct. About your upcoming film, A Winter's Journey, based on a Schubert song and described as, quote, a poet vanished from society who undertakes a hazardous walk across mountains, ice, and snow, a journey that will bring him either death or a new life. And are you that poet in the film?
No, I'm very much not. No, the film I've got two films. I've got Words of War here out at the moment, and Juliet and Romeo, but I have a film coming out next week in England called The Salt Path, which is just a two-hander with Gillian Anderson and I. It's a beautiful film. It's not been bought yet for America. I'm pretty sure it will be. Based on a true story and a memoir, which is incredibly moving. It's the most fantastic and moving love story, I think, and kind of mystical mystery as well. But the Schubert Song Cycle is a very artistic project that my friend I went and did. I'm in the scene. I think I'm just in one scene. I'm not that poet. That's a brilliant Polish actor. And it is a mixture of, I don't know, animation, classical music, imagination. It's not a traditional narrative film. It's an experience. I wouldn't be surprised to find it not just in cinemas but in galleries and museums as well, and being played in front of live orchestras.
And what are you up to in your film coming out next week?
So the film coming out in England is called The Salt Path, and it's a best-selling book. It sold millions of copies. This is a true story, and the couple there in the mid-50s that had a farm in Wales, and They were conned out of it. Someone tricked them in a business deal, and they lost not just their farm, but all their money and everything. They were given like a week to leave their home, their entire life. They had 2 kids who were at university, and they just were so thrown by it. But at the same time, he had a very bad leg and arm. He could barely walk an arm. He'd fallen through the roof of the barn. And during the week they had to pack their house up, he had a doctor's appointment. They were still in shock. They didn't know where they were going to go and what they were going to do. And they went to the doctors and expecting to be told it's arthritis or whatever. The doctor said, it's a fatal neurological condition. You've got weeks, maybe months to live. Go home, avoid the stairs, and say your goodbyes. Little did the doctor know they had no home. And so they did an insane thing. They started to walk. They had nowhere to go. And so they bought backpacks and a tent with their remaining $300. And they just walked the south coast of Britain. So really in arduous conditions, freezing cold and wet, sometimes baking hot and no water. They were wild camping. They were living on pennies, and bowls of rice every day. And he couldn't, his brain was going. It's a neurological condition, but so was his legs and all of his bodily functions when they started. And bit by bit, somehow, no one knows why or how, over the 6 months that they were walking, it came back. They became in tune with nature, and his conditions started to reverse. The doctors still don't understand it. They scan him all the time. He's still alive 10 years later. They've had to walk many, many times, even though she's now written 4 best-selling books. She only wrote the book because when they stopped at the end of 6 months, someone let him live in a barn. It all came back again, and his memory started to go, and he couldn't even remember the walk they'd been on. She wrote a memoir for him for his birthday, thinking it might be the last thing he'd ever read. And instead, it sold millions of copies. Beautiful story.
And getting back to Words of War, taking your point of view as the character of Sasha, do you see Anna as perhaps a danger junkie?
No, not at all. One of the things that's magnificent about Anna, because she's not a war reporter, she was a human interest stories journalist who went down there to try and say something new or different about the war that had already been going on for years. And she found that nothing she had been reading was true. But she also, in her writing, as well as being a magnificent writer, she was vulnerable. She said how scared she was. That's not something that journalists in war correspondents don't do that. She was terrified. But it couldn't break her, but she wasn't fearless by any means, or an adrenaline junkie. She was scared. But she just couldn't not report the things she was seeing, even at a risk to herself and her family's well-being. She couldn't not do it. She's an example of the best of journalism.
And since this is for radio and nobody can see you, when Jason Isaacs looks in the mirror, what does he see?
Oh, someone so much older than I feel. I can't tell you. I mean, I'm so shocked when I'm on set and I meet people and I go to the set and they're all young people. I feel we're all contemporaries, we're all actors. And then somebody says something or does something, and I'm reminded that they're looking at an old actor. They think I'm a veteran. As far as they can say, like I remember being a young actor and going on set with, one of my first things was with Joss Ackland, and there was this much older actor, and he didn't think of himself that way at all. And I keep recently a couple of times I've got a couple of acknowledgements or awards or something, and I realise they're kind of a lifetime achievement award, and I feel like I'm just getting started.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jason Isaacs, for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you, Perry.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
And now on Arts Express, Burkina Faso President and African revolutionary Ibrahim Traore's message to the new Pope Leo.
To His Holiness Pope Robert Francis, I write to you not from a palace nor from the comforts of foreign embassies, but from the soil of my homeland, the land of Burkina Faso, where dust mingles with the blood of our martyrs, and the echoes of revolution are louder than the hum of foreign drones overhead. I am not writing as a man seeking approval, nor as one entangled in diplomatic pleasantries. I write to you as a son of Africa, bold, bruised, unbowed. You are now the spiritual father to more than 1 billion souls, including millions here in Africa. You inherit not just a church but a legacy, and in this moment of transition, while white smoke still lingers above Vatican rooftops, I must send this letter across seas and sands, beyond guards and gates directly to your heart, because history demands it, because truth compels it, because Africa, the wounded and the rising, is watching. Your Holiness, we Africans know the power of the cross. We know the hymns, the prayers, the litanies. We have built churches with calloused hands and defended our faith with our blood. But we also know another truth, one that too many prefer to bury, that the church at times walked beside colonizers, that while missionaries prayed for our souls, soldiers looted our lands, that while your predecessors spoke of heaven, our ancestors were chained on earth. And even now, in this so-called modern age, we feel the chains still not of iron, but of silence, of indifference, of geopolitical games played in holy shadows. So I ask in the name of the mothers who pray on dirt floors and the children who learn catechism with empty stomachs, will your papacy be different? Will you be the Pope who sees Africa not as a periphery but as the prophetic center? Will you be the Pope who does not only visit slums for photo opportunities, but who dares to speak with rage against the forces that make those slums permanent? You see, Your Holiness, I am a man shaped by war, not wealth. I was not groomed for politics by Western institutions. I was not taught diplomacy in Paris. I learned leadership in trenches among the people where pain is teacher and hope is resistance. I lead a nation that was tossed aside by the world until we refused to be silent. We were told we were too poor to be independent, too weak to be sovereign, too unstable to resist. But I tell you this with the thunder of ancestors in my voice. We are done asking for permission to exist. We are done pleading for validation from powers who exploit our minerals while preaching morality. And we are done, absolutely done, watching global spiritual leaders turn their eyes from Africa's cries because the politics are inconvenient. Your Holiness, I speak now not only for Burkina Faso, but for a continent too long patronized. Africa is not a continent of pity, we are a continent of prophets. Prophets who were jailed, exiled, and murdered for daring to challenge the empire. And you, now that you wear the ring of St. Peter Mazisite, will you walk in the path of the prophets? Or will you too be a prisoner of politics? We need no more platitudes. We do not need more thoughts and prayers while Western firms extract uranium from Niger and gold from Congo under armed guard. We do not need diplomatic neutrality while African youth drown in the Mediterranean fleeing wars they did not start, waged with weapons they did not make. We do not need saccharine statements while African sovereignty is auctioned off behind closed doors in Brussels, Washington, and Geneva. What we need is a pope who will name the modern-day Herods, who will thunder against economic empires just as boldly as the church once thundered against communism, who will say without apology that it is a sin for nations to profit from the destruction of Africa. You know, the teachings of Christ. You know, he flipped the tables of money changers. You know, he said, blessed are the peacemakers, but he never said, blessed are the appeasers. So I ask you personally, will you speak against the silence of France and its shadow operations in the Sahel? Will you condemn the arms deals that fuel proxy wars in our deserts and forests? Will you name the greed that dresses itself in charity? The diplomacy that cloaks imperialism in peace talks? Because we see it act, we live it. Your Holiness, I do not ask you to be African. I ask you to be human, to be moral, to be brave. Because courage, real courage, is not blessing the powerful. It is defending the powerless when it costs something. Let me speak plainly. The Vatican has wealth beyond imagination, art beyond price, access beyond borders. But true power is not measured in treasures behind marble walls. Where true power is measured in the courage to confront injustice, even when it comes dressed in a tailored suit, carrying diplomatic credentials and smiling through its sins. Your Holiness, the world stands at a precipice, and Africa, this battered and beautiful continent, is not merely watching from below, we are climbing. We are bleeding, we are rising, and we are daring to ask questions that echo louder than canon law. Where was the church when our presidents were overthrown by foreign-backed mercenaries? Where was the church when our youth were abducted and indoctrinated into wars funded by nations that pretend to be peacekeepers? Where was the church when our currencies collapsed, when the IMF choked our economies? When our leaders were punished for choosing sovereignty over submission? Do not tell us to forgive while the whip is still in the hand of the abuser. Do not tell us to pray while our prayers are met with drone strikes. Do not speak of peace without naming the profiteers of war, because silence, Your Holiness, is no longer holy, and neutrality is no longer noble. If you are to be the shepherd of this global flock, then hear this cry from the dust of Ouagadougou. We are your sheep too. But we do not graze quietly in the fields, we march in the streets. We die on the front lines. We rise from the ashes with fire in our bones and scripture in our mouths. We are not asking for charity, we are demanding justice. And justice must begin with truth. The truth that Christianity in Africa has been both a balm and a blade. The truth that the church has fed our spirits while failing to protect our bodies. The truth that redemption without reckoning is a half-truth, and half-truths have never healed nations. Your Holiness, you now sit upon the chair of St. Peter. But remember, Peter denied Christ 3 times before the rooster crowed. Do not let history say the church denied Africa once again. Let the rooster crow in the Vatican loud and clear. Let it wake the conscience of cardinals and kings. Let it echo through the corridors of power, where men in robes and men in uniforms trade silence for influence. Let it announce a new dawn, not just for the church, but for the world. Because here in Africa, we do not fear dawns, we create them. We are the sons and daughters of Sankara, Lumumba, Nkrumah, and Biko. We carry scriptures in one hand, and the memory of revolutionaries in the other. We have learned to pray and protest with the same breath. And we ask, will your papacy walk with us? Will you meet us in our pain, not just in our pews? Will you recognize the God in our hunger, the Christ in our chaos, the Holy Spirit in our struggle? Because if not now, when? If not, you who would have. And if the church continues to preach peace while ignoring the machinery of oppression, what gospel is left to believe in? I say this not with anger, but with sacred urgency. We are a people at the crossroads of prophecy and politics, and Africa's time is no longer coming. It is here. We are rewriting the narrative, reshaping the future, reclaiming the dignity denied to us by centuries of foreign domination and spiritual manipulation, and the church must decide where it stands. With the powers that be here, with the people who bleed. I do not write this letter to condemn. I write it to invite you, your Holiness, into a deeper solidarity, to a solidarity that walks barefoot with the poor, that dares to speak truth in Rome as boldly as it does in Rwanda, that names the saints not just by miracles but by their commitment to justice. We await your voice, not from balconies, but from trenches and from favelas, from refugee camps, from behind the bars of political prisons where truth is incarcerated, because only that voice, your voice, can redeem the silence, and if you dare to speak it, will Africa hear you? Signed, Captain Ibrahim Traore, resident of the transition, Burkina Faso, son of Africa.
And coming up next on the show.
This is Broe on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass. Well, the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and celebrated in 2 ways. In Russia, where it was called the Great Patriotic War, and where 27 million people died in the war, a massive saluting of the patriotism and of what the Russians gave in order to halt the Nazi invasion. In the West, something quite different. And instead of a great patriotic war, we have a great corporate feast, because that's what's going to happen if, as they're saying, they want $800 billion diverted from social spending to war for practically no reason at all except to enrich arms manufacturers. And so Russia is excluded in the West from the celebration of the end of World War II. So it's 27 million people are not acknowledged. Meanwhile, prominent at the celebrations, the Ukrainian Zelensky, and who is backed by still members of the Azov Brigade. In other words, World War II fascists. So we have a complete and utter turning around of of reality, an alternate history, where the fascists defeated the fascists in World War II, and the Russians are in European newspeak or gobbledygook, the Russians are the new fascists. Now, this is utterly ridiculous. It has no bearing to anything in reality, but it is what's being played out. And So these celebrations, which should be uniting all of Europe, and which might be an occasion for all of Europe to get together to figure out a mutual security and defense program, instead is being used simply not for peace, but to fuel the flames of war in the West. And who is it being fueled by? It's being fueled by the under 30% crowd. That is Macron in France, Starmer in Britain, and Merz in Germany. None of whom have over 30% approval rating, and yet they are the ones who are calling the shots and who are organizing this. Well, the best thing it could be is mass slaughter, and the worst, or the, let's say, the average outcome is that European social services will get cut significantly if this goes through, and there are at the moment very, very few voices of peace, and that's why this celebration, which is not a celebration in the West, is, a lot is being made of it because it is part of a propaganda machine that is designed to fuel this insane, irrational view of Russia as wanting to attack all of Europe. That is not anything that we've seen in Ukraine. Yes, Russia did invade Ukraine, but they were provoked by NATO over a long history. The U.S. organized a coup in Ukraine in 2014, killed Ukrainians with the backing of the U.S. killed 14,000 Russians between 2014 and the start of the special military operation, the SMO, in 2022. And so it goes. So it goes that in the end, peace, or war, is celebrated as peace, and peace is celebrated as war. This is a kind of celebration that would make Orwell blush. It is 1984 all over again. And this is Broe on the Global Cultural Beat, Breaking Glass.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, expression in the arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.